In the olden days, investigative interviews, also known as suspect interviews or interrogations, were very coercive processes in which accusations were shouted at the detainee, who was also sometimes subjected to violence and intimidation by the interrogator. Whilst this is still the case today in some countries, and make sure you never get arrested there, interviewing practice in the UK is much more evidence-based now, which means it employs methods that have been shown to work better. By work, I mean not scaring innocent people into taking the blame for something they haven't done, and enabling interviewers to try and identify when someone seems to be lying, at least in theory. There has been a lot of research in investigative psychology dealing with the psychology of suspect interviews in the past few decades. Gisli Gudjonsson describes how coercive and intimidating tactics may result in false confessions. Such interviewing styles raise the suspect's level of anxiety, which can increase their uncertainty and doubt about what they have experienced. At the same time, they become more sensitive to the interviewer's reactions as they look for signals from their interrogator that the responses they provide are acceptable and their discomfort might be coming to an end. This might lead them to tailor their responses towards gaining approval or avoiding further accusations by agreeing with what the interviewer suggests. Through this process, the suspect's goal can shift from providing their true version of events to getting a favorable reaction from the interviewer more than anything else. So you want to make sure you make the interviewee feel safe and that you do not come across as intimidating or pushy in any way. It has also been shown that interviewers get better cooperation and more evidence from suspects when they are non-judgmental towards them and when they use empathy and rapport in suspect interviews. So, be sure to build rapport with your suspect from the very beginning and to maintain it, and there are at least 3 reasons for why you should do so. 1. They might actually be innocent. 2. If they are not innocent, your job is to make it easier for them to be honest with you. Do your best to enable them to tell you what really happened by letting them know, through how you talk to them, that you will not judge or humiliate them for any of their actions. 3. They are a human being and should be treated with respect. What is rapport and how do you build it? It's a connection between people who just get on. Show that you are on a level with them rather than coming across as authoritative. Be genuine, be respectful and understanding and show concern for their well-being. Acknowledge that you appreciate they are in an uncomfortable situation and that you will do your best to make it as little unpleasant as possible. Explain the process and the caution, etc. thoughtfully. Check they have understood it, because most of the time they haven't. And explain that you are not here to judge, but to establish what happened. Tell them that they are free to decide to what extent they want to help you out and cooperate. In a study with child molesters, it was found when incarcerated offenders were interviewed by researchers that an extremely autonomous, which means self-determining, approach actually encouraged disclosure. The researchers emphasized the convicts' autonomy and explained they did not need to discuss anything they did not feel comfortable discussing, and they even asked if the prisoners wanted to stop when they appeared uncomfortable. That way, they got more out of them. And then there's a whole section of investigative psychology that looks at how to detect deception in interviews. Now, here's a hint. It's not when they look nervous. They're all nervous. I'd be nervous if I'd been arrested, detained, and was getting interviewed for something. Investigative psychology is often used when trying to identify an unknown offender or when trying to identify more offenses that could have been committed by a specific offender. However, in most rape cases, for example, the offender is someone the victim knows. In investigative terms, the task then is not to identify that person, but to prove that the sexual act took place without the victim's consent. Investigative psychology can then be used differently, for example by helping investigators understand how best to interview the victim. Rape victims are under immense pressure, and the emotions they experience might include trauma, a mix of fear, guilt, and disgust, anxiety with regards to the perpetrator, how people such as her family and friends will respond to her, the criminal justice process, speaking to police, going to court, and many other things. It is also not straightforward to interview a suspected rapist, as investigative interviews in and of themselves are very complex matters, but rapists in particular often experience cognitive distortions. These are influences on their thought processes and reasoning that allow the perpetrator to minimize or simply deny their guilt or misrepresent the part the victim played in it in their own mind. Investigative psychology can educate investigators and help them in their decision-making on how best to navigate these emotional challenges in victims and suspects in order to interview them as best they can. With the rape suspect, focus on the actual step-by-step behaviors and reactions of both parties. Ask the suspect what they did and how the alleged victim responded. What does the suspect think this meant? Why did she react in the way she did? Then try to ask questions about the victim's perspective. If he was her, how would he have felt? How could she have interpreted the situation or the offender's actions? Is it possible that she might have seen things differently to how the suspect might have seen them, for example, or to how he thought she had seen them? If you have a defense solicitor in the interview room with you, they might interject and state that their client could not possibly guess how the complainant might have felt. In that case, respectfully and calmly remind the solicitor that their client has already stated what he thought was going through the victim's mind and how his actions were seen by her, and that you are simply trying, together with the client, to see the incident from the other party's perspective. Don't believe the solicitor when they try to tell you that you can't ask that question. They did try to say that to me sometimes. And you can ask any question you feel is relevant. Your questions might help you and their client clarify what happened. Respectfully remind the solicitor, if they are still interjecting, that it is the client's right to decide to answer your questions and that your questions are perfectly valid for this investigation. Try to establish with the suspect, once you've explored the victim's perspective and whether perhaps she might have read the situation differently or had different intentions to what he thought they were, how sure the client is now that she actually wanted him to do what he did. If he is starting to doubt that his initial confident assertion that it was all mutual is still correct, explore this doubt further. For example, you could ask why he is now not so sure anymore. How would he have felt in her place, and then probe his response for further information. Maintain an atmosphere of empathy and respect at all times. This is a very difficult time for the suspect, and an interview is not a way for you to score points and feel empowered, but to level with the person and get an honest account from them. With the rape victim, when you are trying to get their account, all the different emotions they might be flooded with are the paramount obstacle to their ability to give you clear evidence. And actually, don't expect the account to be clear or consistent or in chronological order or logical. You are not dealing with a renowned scientist who is calmly and proudly explaining her research to you. You are dealing with someone who has been completely traumatized, so just accept that the evidence you want to get from her is not going to come out gift-wrapped and neatly typed up in black and white in a way that you would want it. Make sure you acknowledge the horrible emotions she is experiencing. Explain that you are here to listen and to help her tell you what has happened to her. Tell her you will not rush her and that she is safe and that she will be taken seriously and that everything she can tell you might be important evidence, so she should not leave anything out. Be very empathetic and respectful and make sure she knows this is a judgment-free environment, and reassure her that you and your colleagues will do what you can to investigate her case, and that what she can tell you is the most important evidence you can get. It might also be helpful if you explain to her that in these situations, the way that victims recount what has happened is often unstructured and all over the place, and that she should not let this stop her. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this content useful. You can get access to each episode's transcript with key learning points, timestamps, and references if you get yourself onto my mailing list. Just go to the main website on policesciencedoctor.com, and on the bottom of each page you will find a sign-up form for notifications of new content. Just enter your first name, your preferred email address, and the type of organization you work for. You will not get any spam. This is just for me to let you know about new content and for you to get access to all the transcripts.